So as Ezra is explaining, so the relationship of the NGO and the donors and the things they caused to happen, so that brought structural changes to the economy. So that's why then the president and President Kibaki, is actually sort of, saying where we are, and those conditionalities and all those things, they don't make sense. And the point here is, so the whole thing of, in a country, the political economy, it's the two sides of the same coin. So you got to view them, because in terms of international aid and how even programs are designed, they're very, what's the word? They're very, sort of like there's almost, a line, these are economic programs, these are political programs, and then thereafter, the way programs are designed at the sector level, you got to sort of see these two sides of my coin, and then sort of see then, depending on where the country is, sort of the political development and economic development, what then would be the right mix of many things, obviously, that can actually then bring structural change. Because I think that's the thing, and I guess later we'll probably get into, economic transformation and where Kenya is and what then it would look like in the future.
What have been some of the really good experiences you've had with aid, being in the sector? Some of the really memorable experiences that have, left you, realizing that, there has been some impact of aid in the sector.
Thank you. Good examples. Of course, these are conversations of perspective. However, when you think about what Wairu has talked about, the international aid and then enters China. So the year is 2008, and I'm having a conversation with the Minister of State from England. He'd come and he just wanted to get a perspective of how things are. And I remember, obviously, the persons who had invited me, they must have thought I'm crazy, because I'm like, how do you talk to a minister like this? And I remember telling him, let's be honest. So I remember giving him data about, on trade, how much Kenya is exporting to England, and the reverse. And the conclusion of that was, brother, don't compete with China, matters trade. There's some things, when you think of the West, especially stuff to do with, accountability, transparency, they've lived this for a long time. There's some things in that regard that work, So when you think about, and, Ezra has said it and has better history, the whole space of bringing about the constitutional change and, the civil liberties, there was a lot of money that actually came from the West, It was there, and obviously then the President Moi wasn't happy with these things. Many had to sacrifice their lives. And then you had, an ambassador, the American ambassador, Hemstone. He was he was so dramatic. He would be on the streets with us. How do you like that? So when you think about some of the support programs that are very targeted for whether it is strengthening or improving democratic governance, you have Kenya is a success story, but as I said, obviously you have perspectives of, how did it go and all that. So because we cannot, exhaust the question of methodology, but I think for me, that space of overhauling or just trying to sort out, civil liberties, the constitutional dispensation, I think that for me, I would cite it as a good example of where international aid, came through, if that is the word that I would use.
Yeah, I agree entirely with that. But I would also like to cite examples from, I remember from a very young age, my parents, for instance, shifted from a rural setting to Nairobi in the year before independence, 1964. And 1963. So we watched independence happen here as a little kid. And the one thing I never forget was a couple of years after that, the introduction of the cooperative movement into the country, into our communities. and my parents being members of what was called the Jamhuri Credit Consumers Cooperative. And I know for a fact, because I found out later, that my dad was not earning very much. I mean, he'd moved into Nairobi with 6 kids, with a wife and 6 kids, and a fairly small house. But we basically survived on what salary he had and the cooperative, largesse, because they were members of this cooperative. I see the cooperative movement as a major success story in the same way as GK has cited, because I think that there is a lot that the cooperative movement brought into this country, and a lot of that was underwritten by foreign aid, by aid, from different countries. Largely the Scandinavian countries, I think, were, the main propagators of the cooperative movement. And I see that as one of the major successes that they can claim, even though corruption and all that came engaged after that. But I think I see that as a really, really instructive story, how the cooperative movement changed this country's political economy dramatically.
So I think for me, the best experience is of international aid that I have seen is in monies that were put into developing local civil society organizations to be financially stable, to be financially sustainable. And this is from an organization that I worked for that actually, for a long time, there's been this conversation about, not-for-profits, what happens when the donor money leaves, right? And for the first time I experienced an organization that actually thought about it and did something about it. And a lot of the support came from aid, but mostly from the philanthropy organizations. And I've just seen the important role that philanthropy has played in this country, and is playing in the civil society sector, and is playing in just changing the narratives. I was actually reading something about Mackenzie Scott, the former, the ex of Jeff Bezos, and how she's just giving out millions of dollars to organizations and just shifting the whole ecosystem, really. And this organization I worked with brought together, always started from the premise that communities have something to give, that they're not completely poor, right? That they have something. And I remember the first experience was that, we would give matching grants. So we would say, okay, we would go to the community and we would tell them, okay, what do you want to do? And they would say, okay, we want to build a hospital, we want to build a school, we want to build a boarding. So we went to a community which is about 200 kilometers from Nairobi, and they said, what, we want more classrooms, and we want a boarding kind of facility for the girls, because we feel that they're not able to get the education that they need. And then, we were like, okay, that's fine. What can you contribute towards that? And the whole community brought goats, and they brought like lots and lots of goats, and they were put in this pen. And they said, this is what we're contributing. And the value of those goats was actually 60% of how much they needed to build those facilities. And, it completely blew me away, because it reinforced the fact that communities have something to give, and that many times we're just saying they're so poor and they need us, but they have something that they can contribute, and that was such a powerful thing for me. And this then grew out into building out matching grants and building out endowment funds to support community initiatives like that. So where we would bring money together and would invest it, and then the interest that came out of it would then go back to supporting models like that have just shaped how I've thought about development, moving forward, and realizing that there's a place where we can start from. I mean, I want to also talk about the role that international aid has played in just the women's rights movement in Kenya and in Africa, because a lot of money has gone into, and even when you look at the education programs, you will find that many of them have gone into educating girls and what we call the girl child, and many young women and many women in the sector have actually come to the space and have been able to be economically independent, etc., because of international aid. What is the worst of aid?
The worst of aid?
Yeah.
Well, I think aid that is not responsive to what the needs are, and the needs have been described by those who are in need, is really bad aid. I'll give you a very concrete example. This is something, a personal experience. And it came from a country that I will not name, because you guys might guess it very easily. But the situation was that where people in that country were saying they would really like to help poor Africans. And they asked if they could send a group to come and, I was working with Catholic Relief Services then, and so we were considered fairly neutral, and so these people say, we'd like to be shown a development situation where we can make a difference. And we're going to send out a team that will come and look at that situation, and we'd like to know then how we might help. And we said, fine, you're welcome to send your team here. And they came out, and now they said, give us an idea of the situation, of the place you will take us to, and give us an idea of what the needs are, and then let the team come and determine it. And so we described, basically from our strategic plan, a project that we had in mind, and we said this is an area that could use some help. And it was soon after a declaration of a famine in the north of Kenya, which is very similar to the drought we have right now. And so we were thinking, well, sinking some boreholes would be really good to provide water in that place, and providing other forms of support that will enable this community to become more resilient and to at least be able to feed itself would be a way to go. Long story short, when these guys went back after their tour, they had picked up a totally different story. They said, yes, those people do need water, okay? But also, we noticed all the people we went to visit, none of them were wearing shoes. And so they went and put together a container full of tennis shoes. And these were all, because these are, it's Africans, and they're big, they gave us a range in sizes from 7.5 to 13, size 13 tennis shoes. And we get this container. And then they said mosquitoes are a real big problem as well. So we got a bunch of drugs. None of them deal with mosquitoes because they don't know mosquitoes out there. But they, we had all the, medicaments you might require for a bunch of Africans who are in real need of medicine, because they went to the clinic and noticed that there were no drugs there. So they were going to send those drugs from their country. I'm glad I didn't say which country this was, because it was crazy. But we get these shipments, and then we discover that the machine they were talking about doing the pumping were totally different from what we were intending to buy. So in the end anyway, they sent out money which was a fraction of what we needed to do that project. In the end, the project didn't work. But also we had problems with distributing these shoes, as you can imagine. I mean, I wear a size 11, but and that was one of the smaller ones in the thing. So, we had problems there. But for me, this was one of the worst projects we ever, were involved with.